It is my great honor and great privilege to speak to you, to a group of Christians in this day and age struggling to keep our identity strong, struggling to, fight the outside influences and come into a purity, especially a purity of having communion together. Richard, I applaud you for that wonderful meditation that you brought us to this morning. I look at Richard Boot and I remember his first time when we were at the other building. And it was a little awkward, he was a little nervous, and things weren't just as quite as flowing. But right now, I'm looking at Superman of communion meditations, where spot on, bringing us to that brink. Thank you very much, Richard. And I also feel like I myself, and probably many of you, have grown since those days and have learned things from the Word or tempered our personalities and the outside influences so that we are more and more like Christ. And have we got a lot of work to do? Absolutely. But we have come a long way as a church, as a human being, as a brother and sister in Christ. I know a preacher from Virginia who was previously a boxer, a pugilist. I'm going to throw so many lefts at you, you're going to beg me for a right. That kind of guy. I mean, shouting and adrenaline and veins popping. This guy was a short guy. Tough as nails. He became a preacher. Can you imagine that the people in the audience would pay attention to him where he'd box their ears? I mean, they were probably a little bit afraid of him. He was very unconventional. It was said of him that he would sometimes, during his sermons, whether they were sermons that would need to do something to demonstrate, he would jump on pews and get in people's faces, and he wouldn't just stand behind the pulpit. He was quite amazing. I liked the guy. I met him. One Sunday morning, as church people up in Virginia were trying to find their own favorite seats and meeting with their own favorite friends, as we do here, as is the custom at every church, there was a visitor in the back pew. He was dressed in old clothes and looked a little scruffy. So, and this is a large congregation, 600. They had 2 services. And so this guy had come in the back, and I didn't know if it was his best clothing or not. I mean, I didn't hear that in the story. But I think the visual would have been for those coming in, if this is the best this guy's got, then he's probably got some disease or cooties or something, So who knows what people thought. But they passed him by and went ahead with their business as usual. He sat down there as everyone found their spot, and no one bothered to welcome him or say anything, not even hi. He was mostly shunned. The music began, and the praise team did a marvelous job, as ours did this morning. Thank you, folks, very much. And Josh in the booth, you're doing miracles. I appreciate it. I know sometimes there's a little demon gets loose in the sound system or the speakers or whatever. So the prayers were good. The communion service was excellent. And it was time for the preacher to begin the sermon, which, as you saw me, I'm right up front. Well, it was the practice of this particular minister to sit up front, and nobody was sitting there. So as everything had waned down to expectation, they're looking around, where's the preacher? Well, lo and behold, you could probably guess. It was that old man in the back. He was the preacher. The pastor of the church had dressed up in old clothes, and it wasn't Halloween. It was to make a point. It was to show the church, not just tell the church what it looks like to judge somebody. So, he started to read this particular verse in James. It is chapter 2, Fred, but it's beginning before it gets to faith without works is dead. It says this in James 2, 1 through 13. Follow along if you have Bibles or whatever means you have electronically. My brethren, do not hold your faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ with an attitude of personal favoritism. It's the first words out of his mouth. I think he took off the hat, he took off the old shabby jacket, and he got up, and he might have had some presentable clothes by now. For if a man comes into your assembly with a gold ring and dressed in fine clothes, there also comes in a poor man in dirty clothes, and you pay special attention to the one who is wearing fine clothes, and say, you sit here in a good place, and you may say to the poor man, you stand over there, or sit down by my footstool. Have you not made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil motives? Man, I don't like that word, evil motives. James is not holding back on his punches. He's talking to the assembly of the church and how they're acting in this arena of personal favoritism. Listen, my beloved brethren, James continues. Did not God choose the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom which he promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Is it not the rich who oppress you and personally drag you into court? Do they not blaspheme the fair name by which you have been called? Now he's speaking now of the rich outside of the church. He's talking about those that act in a worldly way concerning this world's wealth. If, however, you are fulfilling the royal law according to Scripture, quote, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, unquote, you are doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles in one point, he has become guilty of all. For he who said, do not commit adultery, also said, do not commit murder. Now, if you do not commit adultery, but you do commit murder, you still have become a transgressor of the law. So speak and act as those who are to be judged by the law of liberty. For judgment will be merciless to one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. That's important. Underline that. Mercy triumphs over judging. Who says you can't judge a book by its cover? Who says that? Everybody. No. I suppose I've said it. You can't judge a book by its cover, which means you need to read what it's all about, right? Not just look at the pretty title and the pretty bindings, but you need to read it and find out and then judge the book by its contents. This morning I want to dive into this very human condition of judging others because of their financial condition and not by measuring them in faith. James calls it an attitude of personal favoritism. How many in here this morning have got an attitude? Oh, you guys don't want to admit it. Okay, well I do. I've got, oh, guess, there we got one taker, another taker, we got some takers. Good. We got some honorable people in here, willing to step up. In the churches across our nation, there is much diversity in the membership in poorer neighborhoods compared to wealthy neighborhoods. You've seen this, haven't you? You've seen the big churches in the downtown areas, and you go in and they're best dressed, man, they have three-piece suits and the jewelry and the Ritz and the cars out in the parking lot are Lincolns and Teslas or other cars that may be considered wealthy kind of cars. Do you know that sometimes those downtown neighborhoods start changing? I know of a neighborhood over in Seminole Heights, which is a big neighborhood. Seminole Heights used to be a pretty middle class to poor neighborhood. I mean, working people that knew how to operate a wheelbarrow and a shovel, they would live there. They've had the house for years, and then all of a sudden, these professional people said, you know what? Here's a cheap house. I can fix that thing up. And the next thing you know, it's called gentrification. It just means that the neighborhood changes from the poor to the middle to upper class professional people, and they buy the old houses that were affordable, and next thing you know, the entire neighborhood is no longer affordable. Where do those people go that operate the wheelbarrows and dig ditches or work at the maintenance positions for the county or the city? Where do they go to find a house that they can afford on their salary? So you see, they're pushed into another part of town. Now I know another part of town where the houses were middle to upper class, and it's in East Tampa also, a little farther south, right on 78th Avenue there. There's some neighborhoods that are getting, the cars aren't looking so new. The roofs kind of look like they could use replacing. There's some that are painted some strange colors, and some are the paint is peeling. In other words, it's not looking so good, and the real estate values are kind of cheap, and you kind of think, something's going on there. As a matter of fact, there's one particular neighborhood that I'm thinking. The neighborhood has changed so much that the homeless population has boomed. There's people daylight and evening and midnight walking the streets with carts, and just the poorest of the poor. And the churches in both of those areas can sometimes resent the change and hold out for what they could just adopt the change and have the church be appropriate to the neighboring people that are available to be saved by the gospel of Jesus Christ, instead of holding out to look like they used to look in 1950 and 60 and 70. Are you with me? The idea of rich, middle, and poor people living near us is true. The idea of mixing these three classes in church is rare, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Mixing the poor, the middle, and the rich because we have a common faith is the point of James' lesson. The poor man was told to sit in the worst spot in the place where you can't hear, you can't see, everybody's taller than you stand, and you can't see in front of you. That's right, you got to look out the aisle or something. And that's where the poor people get to sit, and the rich people get to come right up here in the premium seats that are comfortable. They probably rock. Who knows? I don't know. We are preferential, aren't we? I heard of a well-educated church growth expert tout that the church should reflect the neighbors where it's located. Now, I don't know if he went around to all the churches and saw some of the older people in churches weren't the same race as what all of the neighborhood close to them was, or whether they saw they were richer than all of the neighbors around, or what the case was, that there was a difference. But there was a resistance in the church to become what the community needed. And we are the church, and we are to be what the community needs, not our idea of a social club with everybody in it looking just like me. I mean, if everybody had Teslas out there, I'm looking for someplace with a Volkswagen. Jesus has a teaching on this. You with me? Do not judge that you be not judged. Remember that one? Oh, that's often quoted, isn't it? Somebody, you go up there and you make an observation about, oh, you're not supposed to judge. You're a Christian. You're not supposed to judge. Don't judge. Jesus said, do not judge. And he did. But he also said right after that, for in the way you do judge, you will be judged. So what's he saying? Be careful what you say and how you judge, because you will be judged according to your mouth and your behavior and your motives and your actions. So you better be careful not to pick on somebody when you're not even looking at your own self. By your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Man, you criticize all the people you want to criticize, but you better be pristine, right, just glowing like Jesus. You better have 13 halos on your head before you start playing that game, because I tell you, you will not win that game. You cannot stand up to Jesus if he's going to look at you the way you look at others. Not going to work for you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? I love this. I love this. I'm a carpenter. And I get this. I mean, have you ever cut a tree down with a chainsaw? If you didn't have goggles on, I guarantee you, there's going to be a time when one of them little things is going to come up and nail you right in a place you don't like, right in your eye. And guess what you're going to do? You're going to turn that thing off, set it down. You're going to pay attention to your own self. No more cutting until I get this irritating thing out of my own eye. He continues. He says, why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Isn't that cool? I'm trying to pick a speck out of yours and I got a log in mine. That's funny. Yes, that's right. In the vernacular of Wachula, that there's funny. I don't care what you say. Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and behold, the log is in your own eye. You hypocrite. Who here wants to be a hypocrite? Oh, come on, let's join the hypocrite club. Come on. You got any takers? I'll be the president. Nobody wants to be a hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do you get that? We always look at somebody else because if we don't want them looking at us, we got this little peek thing here where we can see them, but all of us is hidden, right? We're going to pretend we've got no faults. Do you judge the poor man as stupid? When you see a poor person, is that the first thing? He's stupid. He or she is the homeless woman mentally ill? Have the poor made bad choices in life? Probably. Have you? Probably. Is it possible to become poor from just a wrong place, wrong time scenario? You know, where it's no fault to be assigned. You got caught as I have, in a time warp where things in politics or things in the banking industry or things worldwide just stop. Can you and I stand up to God's judgment, who knows all and sees all? And I'm talking about if we didn't have Christ to cover for us. If we didn't have Jesus to pay for our debts, could we stand before a righteous God and tout, here I am, Lord, look at me. Have you considered me, how good I am? Man, I help the poor. Man, I'm in church every Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, every hour. I'm here every. Can you imagine how good I am, Lord? I knock on my neighbor's door and invite him to church. Every Sunday, I feed the neighbor's dog, give it back. Can you imagine trying to stand up before a righteous God when he knows everything about me? Things I don't want anybody to know. And you've got him. You got him in there. Oh yeah, he sees that. Yeah, he sees that. What kind of people ought we to be? The point is that we cannot see about others what God can see. We don't know how they got there. The bottom line is, you're not God. Is that God calling? Because I want to see if he wants it. You're not God and neither am I. We're not God. We don't get to see the perspective of God. We only see what we see right in front of us. And it's not the whole picture. Being judgmental is worse than being poor in God's eyes. Is that what James just said? Being judgmental and rich and good and righteous and all is worse than just being poor. Didn't Jesus say, blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall see God? I think I got that right. You might want to look that up. I might have mixed it up. Poor in spirit, poverty of clothing, having to walk around with a borrowed grocery cart and find a spot where the rain won't get you and the wind won't get you at night. We just went to Daytona Beach this weekend. Man, I don't know where those people are at night. But in the morning, I saw grocery cart after grocery cart with blankets and just stuff this way and that way. And it wasn't just a few. It was so many. I remarked, I said, what's going on here? And I don't know, but I want to say, we're down at the beach and there's a lot of needle casings down there, and I see people sleeping. I don't know how late they stayed up, but they're sleeping on the beach right up next to the table. I don't know what's going on there, but I know there's a lot of people that need Jesus. And they need a way, they need somebody to look at them differently than what they appear in the flesh. Being judgmental is worse than being poor. Jesus and James had spoke harshly to the sin and the attitude of personal favoritism. But what can we do about it if we judge ourselves in this regard and come up wanting or needing help to overcome our evil attitude? Did you ask me that? Good question. Thank you for asking. So what did James say? So speak and so act as those who are to be judged by the law of liberty. We're to be aware that there's a judge looking at us. That should help a little bit, right? Knowing there's somebody watching every step I'm taking. When that state police is 2 cars back, you better believe that speedometer, okay, let's get around 5 miles over, that's it, no more. I don't want to tempt anybody. When I'm being watched, when I know that I'm being looked, I mean, it's not just me, everybody on I-4. There's a policeman on the side. We all go, ooh. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged by the law of liberty, for judgment will be merciless. Merciless, no mercy, to one who has shown no mercy. Listen, mercy triumphs over judgment. Let's see, I don't know who said it, but be a lover, not a fighter. Mercy and love. Love one another. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Short story here, and I'll end this thing. And a lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" You know he's a smart aleck. You know he's testing Jesus. He's trying to be the smartest guy in the room and let Jesus know that, I'll trip you up. So Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? How does it read to you?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, Jesus said to the Pharisee, "You've answered correctly." You get a star, you get a check. Do this and you will live. But wishing to justify himself, you can just see the, oh, man, he got me. Oh, man, I wanted to be the smartest guy. He just outsmarted me. He said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor? Tell me that one." Can't you see him? Sarcastic Pharisee, all dressed up, looking good, with scripture hanging all over him, memorized probably the whole Pentateuch. So Jesus replied and said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among the robbers, and they stripped him, and they beat him, and they went away, leaving him half dead. And by chance a priest was going down on that road. Oh, help is coming. And when he saw him, he passed by on the other side." Can you imagine a priest in the Jewish faith who wasn't used to blood? Let me tell you something about the Jewish religion. Sacrifice was bloody. Man, they did stuff, and that blood was everywhere. And raw meat and cutting things up. So this poor guy beaten half to death must have looked like some hamburger, a little bit, bleeding and whatever. And here the priest Oh, I don't want to get dirty. I don't want to get involved. I got to go to church. Likewise, a Levite was coming to that place. He was also coming from the worship, from church, if you will, in Jerusalem, coming down the road to Damascus, and passed him by on the other side. Same thing. I'm a Levite. Oh man, I just got through cleaning up after chopping up a couple of calves and getting rid of the trash, bones in the heap. And man, I don't want to get involved in this. But an enemy of Jews, a Samaritan. He's from a different country. He's different. He's probably a different color. He's got a different language. They understand each other from what I hear in the Bible, but they've got a different dialect. They were mixed in with different people. Half-breeds, if you will. They don't look the same. And they didn't want nothing to do with each other. Here's the enemy of the Jew walking down that same road as the priest and the Levite, and guess what? But a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion. The human side came out, not the secular, the sectarian. I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, I can't have anything to do with you. Not the one who would be, I'm a Catholic and you're a Pentecostal, I can't have anything to do with you. None of that was in him. He said, I'm a man, and you're hurt, I can help. He felt compassion. And he came to him, and he bandaged up to his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii, 2 days' wages, about, in our vernacular, $400 if you're an iron worker, maybe $500. And gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and whatever else you may spend, when I return, I will repay you. Man, that's a guy I want to be my friend. I don't care what country he's from. I don't care what color he is. I don't care what side of the political aisle he is. That dude is somebody I can relate to. So Jesus asked the Pharisee, the smart aleck Pharisee, the intelligent Pharisee, this question. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robbers' hands? I think he turned white. I think he must have gone flush, lost some blood, got faint or something, got weak-kneed. Because he said, he wouldn't say the word Samaritan. He said the one who showed mercy toward him. Couldn't even admit that in the story Jesus told, that the enemy of the Jews, the people that they hated in their neighborhood, kind of like Texans and Mexicans on the border crisis right now and other nations coming, there's some animosity there. There's some protectionism right there. The one who showed mercy toward him. And Jesus said to him, go and do the same. If he had a tail, he would have tucked it between his legs and headed on out of there, right? Jesus just whooped on him real good. A good friend of mine years ago was a great help to me in the church. They had come in from a Baptist church and they were helping us, a little Church of Christ. We were a little different than the Church of Christ I grew up in. We had the piano and we had different things. We were trying to be an end all for everybody. But they came in and they really enjoyed our service, enjoyed our fellowship, and enjoyed the friendship with my then wife and myself. I really appreciated him for his help, because he stimulated me to go out there. Let's go on out and knock on doors today, Alan. Wait a second, I just got done preaching. You want to go out and knock on? Yeah, let's go knock on doors. Let's fill this place up. I enjoyed his enthusiasm. You can imagine we became friends. And when we became friends, that means that a lot of things that he did that I might not agree with, I still loved him. I loved him anyway. I loved him through it. I knew he was different. He came up with a different background. And every once in a while they sing a song I'd never heard in my life, because they were also from Kentucky. So there's a whole different world right there. But they would sing these songs, and I'm going, you're blessing me. I'm hearing things I've never heard before. Well, one day somebody from the church, and this was sometime later, was saying, his name was Hutch. Love you, Hutch. If you can hear this and see this, man, I want to touch base again, because I miss you. But Hutch had said some things to somebody else that I didn't hear, and that somebody else came to me and said, Alan, Hutch is talking bad about you. What preacher do you... I don't know a preacher. I don't know which ones you know. I don't know a preacher who somebody hadn't said something bad about, either to their face or behind their back. It doesn't make any difference. I know there are things said about me, even here. And guess what? If I love you, it just water off a duck's back. I don't even care. And for him, when I heard what he was saying, whether I wasn't good enough or not working hard enough or too ugly or I should wash my hair more off, whatever it was, probably all four of those, I didn't care because I loved the man. Mercy triumphs over judgment. And to this day, I mean, he went through a divorce that really upset me because they didn't try harder to work it out. But on this side of divorce myself, I get it. I get it. The Good Samaritan is a story that Jesus told which called out racism and judgment and showed human kindness and agape love, one for the other, was God's will for all of us. Knowing the law of God is different. Knowing the law of God is different from putting it into practice. Do not just say I'm a Christian, but rather show love to the unlovable, to the poor, the unhealthy, and prove that you are a Christian. In that church in Virginia, that pastor dressed up that day, and he embarrassed a lot of good folks. He embarrassed a lot of well-dressed, well-groomed, well-educated folks that had missed this teaching in James and apparently needed a new lesson to be brought from the pulpit. And the man brought it very well. I was tempted to do, you know, you hear from one preacher what he does. Oh, that's so cool, I want to do that. But, you know, I don't think I'm all that anyway. So you get the regular old me, and I'm going to tell you that you should love one another more than judge one another according to what race, what socioeconomic background, what political office you have, that we are together because why? Jesus called us to be one, as he and the Father are one. In that oneness, you've got to overlook some things of the world and look down deep into the heart of those that are Christians with you. Okay? So you're allowed to judge. You're a Christian. You're allowed to judge, but watch when you do it. Make sure you do it right, so that when the Lord would judge you, he'd go, one of mine, leave him alone. He's in. He's in. She's in. The lesson is yours today. If you've got a need today, I'll call up the praise team. You have another song? This is a time of decision making. If any of you would like to make a decision and make it known before the church, I always bring this time. It's not that it's the only time. It's just the best time. If you want to call and make an appointment, and we can talk, we can pray, we can gather a little group around. But these are the times when Christians come together to minister to other Christians. And after a service like this, we sang, we prayed, we've had communion together, we've heard a Bible study lesson in there, Genesis 30 I heard, and we've heard a sermon from James chapter 2. I mean, we're full up, so if there's a need, we want to pray for you. If there's somebody in here who has not accepted the Lord, then I want to encourage you. We've got a baptismal back there. And we'll accept a confession and a repentant heart all day long. And then get in that baptismal pool. And as it says in Romans, you will rise to newness of life. You will become a born-again Christian.